Fantasy hockey season is officially back. And that's why you're tapped right back into your daily source for fantasy hockey news and betting breakdowns. The Tuesday edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast arrives in the Pacific Division, breaking down every single team, 8 through 1. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Hockey is back, and so are we for the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out the everydayers, salute, and thank you so much for holding us down and making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, Mr. Roden, here we go. Giddy up. Last division in our previews. We do it every season. Predictions, taking a look at how we think these divisions break down, and of course, some fantasy sleepers and sneaky ads. I think this Pacific Division, not just because we're trying to keep today short and sweet, looks to me to be almost the easiest to predict. The bottom few teams, I think, are going to be the bottom few teams, and we know who's at the top of this one. So let's get to it. Number 8, who are you looking at? But I think it's clear who's coming in last once again.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious who we are dealing with in that 8 position from the Pacific Division. And even though the making of this team is looking a little bit different, and we do like what this team is. By the way, if my voice is pretty quiet, it's because I lost my voice over the weekend. So
there we go.
Battling through that. But
appreciate that.
For me, number 8, San Jose Sharks coming in. I mean, this is also a team that was going through the goaltender carousel all season long. They had Mackenzie Blackwood, they had Capo Kakin and Devin Cooley, Magnus Krona, Georgi Romanov. So 5 goaltenders throughout the season. Mackenzie Blackwood was the guy who played majority of his time getting those starts for the San Jose Sharks, and that's just really not a tandem you want to be going into the season with. Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek going into the season. This might go down as one of the worst defensive groups in the National Hockey League going into this year as well. I mean, Mario Ferrara, Jan Ruda, Jake Wallman, Cody Ceci, Henry Thrun, and Matt Benning. That is not a good blue line for the San Jose Sharks going into this season.
Agreed.
We do like the top 6 forward group. I mean, they get out. They have Macklin Celebrini coming in. I know he's injured right now. They have Will Smith making his debut in the National Hockey League for his rookie season. They get Tyler Toffoli in the offseason. Fabian Sutherland showed really good signs of potential last year as well. Eklund too. So there's things cooking in the top 6 forward group, but
Agreed.
You were doing, when we were doing the Central Division, you talked about the goal differential for the Chicago Blackhawks. There was a goal differential of 150 for the San Jose Sharks.
Ugh.
This is not a very talented group on both ends of the ice right now. They're a little bit more talented up front, but still one of the worst teams, if not the worst team. They had multiple 10-game losing streaks last season. So for me, San Jose Sharks come in last.
When you have a goals against number of 326 goals against, and that outpaced the next closest team by almost 30 goals, and that was the Columbus Blue Jackets, you're going to be in tough. The needle is starting to point back in the right direction. You mentioned why. It's going to take time. I love Mike Greer in the front office. They do now have, though, a couple of intriguing fantasy prospects to look at. They also bring in Askarov from Nashville. I know that they sent him down, but he has got to be the guy that they are hoping takes that blue paint. However, they are still going to struggle while they find their identity. A team that's a little bit farther down the line, but I think that is still in the very same situation still. Getting there, intriguing prospects in the forward group, improving, going to be a little bit better. It's the Anaheim Ducks who got to come in at number 7, I assume. And when you look at the makeup of this young forward group still, I'm even a little bit more confident. And I think that's because they really have done an amazing job. I think it's Pat Verbeek in the front office in Anaheim here, pulling together some dirty young players. Cutter Gauthier is the 4th favorite in Vegas to win the Calder Trophy. Eyes double peeled on him. Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish. What does Trevor Zegras do? Bounce back candidate. Obviously, Troy Terry. And on the back end, Jackson Lacombe, Mintyukov. They obviously have to get something out of Lucas Dostal in the cage now that John Gibson is on IR, at least for the start of the season. I think they just brought in James Reimer still. So the back end is going to be a concern for this team as well. I got the Ducks coming in at 7, but a couple of those names, Leo Carlson and especially Cutter Gauthier, Mason McTavish, all bringing some intriguing fantasy value this season.
Yeah, 7. Anaheim Ducks come in for 7 for me as well, and it looks like as projection wise, they're spreading the love around a little bit in the forward group. I mean, Troy Terry's all the way down to the third line with Frank Vetrano, who had a breakout season last year. You've got Cutter Gauthier on that top line with Leo Carlson and Alex Killorn, Mason McTavish and Trevor Zegras rocking that second line. So they're trying to spread the wealth around a little bit in that forward group. But you're right. I mean, this is a little bit of a team that's going to hurt on the back end as well. I mean, not a lot of guys on that blue line who can really jump into the play and make a difference on the rush, getting it on the man advantage and doing all those things, quarterbacking the power play and really helping on that end. A lot of great guys still on the blue line. Ratko Gudas being the 9th captain in franchise history. We like Pavel Mintyukov, Cam Fowler still getting it done with this team for his entire career. I mean, so there's a few things, but still not really a guy who's going to take that lead and take that role as that top blue liner for the Anaheim Ducks. So they come in 7th for me as well. Number 6, I'm going with the Calgary Flames in this position. I know you said they're not going to be as bad as everyone thinks they're going to be.
Could have been a bold take.
They're going to be bad, and I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains with this team as well. I mean, we're going to see a lot of prospects get into the lineup on both sides of the ice. I mean, blue line and the forward group. You've got Dustin Wolf making his, Dustin Wolf's coming into the National Hockey League as a full-time goaltender potentially, and you wonder how he's going to do at this level as such a small goaltender as well. So for me, Calgary Flames, I'm just going to, short with this one. Calgary Flames come in at that 6th position for me. I'm a little bit worried about that, about the blue paint with them, even though we do like Dustin Wolf and what he's done in his junior career, with his other professional teams he's played with. But for me, Calgary Flames come in at number 6.
This is a Calgary team that's just overall lacking in offensive scoring punch is one of the concerns that I have looking at this lineup, and digging into the numbers actually backs me up. I believe they finished, if I'm looking at this right, tied for 18th in scoring overall last year with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they just lost Igor Sharangovich for the start of the season. Blake Coleman probably going to have to slot up the lineup. That might be good for your boy because I do have Blake Coleman in a couple of formats. However, that's not good for a team that was really going to have to lean heavily, I think, on that top unit of Kadri, Kuzmenko, and Sharangovich. And now, as much as I like Blake Coleman's ability to slot up and down the lineup, this is a team that can ill afford any offensive punch not being on the ice, especially when the point that you just made holds true. We like Dustin Wolf. He has got it done in the AHL back-to-back years as the number 1 goalie in that league. It's not the NHL. And without scoring to support a young goaltender, it could be a long season in Calgary. I wanted to put them higher still because I do think they could go on some heaters, but I just do think that the Seattle Kraken are a little bit better. We'll talk about the Kraken right after the break. I got the Flames at 6. We'll talk about the rest of our top breakdown for the Pacific Division and tomorrow's episode. Bold predictions for the upcoming season. We got bets back this week, and we got hockey, baby, in full swing. And do not miss a single episode. We're here Monday through Friday until the cup gets lifted. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Hey, NFL fans, start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the page where you place your bets. Get started with a $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 wager, and that's at FanDuel.com.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip and I appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for holding us down at the start of this week. We know we missed the Monday episode, but we were both on the IR, like we said on our Twitter account. So thank you for holding us down and continuing to show the support and all the love. We appreciate it. Flip, over to you, my friend.
Yes, sir.
You already talked about the Calgary Flames, right? We talked about
Yes,
Dustin
sir.
Wolf, number 5 on the list. I think it's pretty obvious who we're going to go with, but I'll let you start and kick us off.
Appreciate that. And yeah, look, The Chandler Stevenson ad by the Kraken, they overpay long-term. Brandon Montour's contract, obviously we have concerns, but just on paper, looking at this team compared to Calgary, they are much, much more balanced up front, and they do have a better forward group. It's not even close, and I think the blue line is also better. So up the middle, I like what they have going on. Beniers, Stevenson, Shane Wright, and Yanni Gourde. Yeah, I know Shane Wright is disappointed. Chandler Stevenson might be overpaid. In terms of helping this team win games, like just aside from fantasy for a sec, I think that's a very solid forward group, especially up the middle where I think that will be their strength. What does Andre Burakovsky do? Jaden Schwartz, Jordan Eberle. For me, those are all very solid second line pieces that are going to have maybe even third line on some teams, and the Kraken are going to rely on them heavily. Someone's going to have to step up. We're looking at your boy Eli Tolvanen as well. Oliver Bjorkstrand, sneaky guys here, Steele, all of them, right? Kind of fitting into the same mold. They're not your top 4, 5, or 6 round draft picks in terms of fantasy. You know, they're middle to the back end of your drafts. However, this team, much like the others that we've already talked about, it's got to come down to Joey Decord once again. Someone in the blue paint. He was sensational last year. Grubauer has had his struggles, and I wanted to bring this up because you know me and these numbers. The power play for the Seattle Kraken last year was an issue. They struggled on the power play last year, and I wanted to bring that up. 17th in the NHL. That's not going to be good enough when you have to roll through such offensive-minded teams as the Vancouver Canucks, Edmonton Oilers, and even the LA Kings. In your own division, you're going to have to do something more on special teams, especially on the power play. That's where I'm looking at for this Seattle team. They come in at 5. I think they sniff around for a wild card spot, perhaps for a chunk of the season. Look, they finished spot on with 81 points with the Calgary Flames last year. So I don't know. Someone's going to have to do something. I'm going to spit it out. Seattle Kraken at 5. It's hard for me to put my finger on this team.
Yeah, it is. And I also have them at the 5 position as well. And I think they are going to be a lot better than the Calgary Flames for multiple reasons. They have consistent goaltenders in both Joey Decord and Philip Grubauer over Vladar and Dustin Wolf. That's a major concern going into the season. So I have a lot more faith in that tandem than the tandem in the Calgary Flames locker room, even though there might be some overpayments with the guys they got this offseason. Brandon Montour is going to be a difference maker. This blue line is going to be a bruising, heavy blue line to get through and go and do things offensively. So I like the blue line actually. And I think that third line of Shane Wright, Eli Tolvanen, and Oliver Bjorkstrand could be a very sneaky line this upcoming season, not just for the Seattle Kraken, but as a really good one in the National Hockey League, especially if Shane Wright can start to show his creativity, his speed, his quickness, and lead that third line for the Seattle Kraken. So I think that's going to be a really good thing for the Seattle Kraken going into this season. But also talk about some of the guys they lost last year to injury. Vince Dunn only played 59 games. Jaden Schwartz missed 20 games. Brandon Tanev missed 15, 16 games. Burakovsky missed 33 games. So a lot of lost games for some of their top players for the Seattle Kraken. Hopefully they can stay fully healthy for this season, play majority of the regular season for the Seattle Kraken and kind of get things going. But again, I'm looking at that third line of Shane Wright, Eli Tolvanen, and Oliver Bjorkstrand to make a huge difference for this organization this upcoming year.
Also, just to go back to Joey Decord, .916 save percentage last year, 2.46 goals against, 3 shutouts. The record 19, 18, and 11 doesn't jump off the page, but I think his play at times really did. He was sensational. If he can find that kind of play, maybe they do take a step forward in a major way. Those names that you threw out there on that third line, Steele, I got one word: intriguing. So let's keep our eyes peeled on it. Over to the 4 slot. It's got to be the Vegas Golden Knights, I think, right? I don't know. I've got concerns about this team in terms of, is there going to be magic in the crease once again? They've had that over the last couple of years, but Laurent Brossoit, gone. Logan Thompson, gone. All these security blankets that played well for them aren't there. And look, Ilya Samsonov, this isn't the hate on Ilya Samsonov show, but coming in to back up a guy in Aiden Hill, that we are going to not give a single point against the man who carried them to a cup a couple of years ago. I just have my concerns. The blue line, solid. Jack Eichel, solid. But I just don't know if this is going to be the same Vegas Golden Knights team that we've seen over the last couple of years, Steele. And I'll turn it over to you. Look, 98 points last year. Still a good season. 6-4-0. They finished the year in their last 10 games and only 5 points back, 6 points back of the Edmonton Oilers. So maybe I'm hating a little bit. They still should be a playoff team. I wasn't ready to come on here and say they're going to miss the playoffs. I have concerns. I'll leave it at that.
Look, I'll come on here and say it. There's a chance this team misses the playoffs.
Thank you.
This is a different looking Vegas Golden Knights team than we've seen since their inaugural season, since they won the Stanley Cup. I mean, besides that top line of Ivan Barbashev, Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, which, by the way, we all know how brittle Mark Stone and Jack Eichel can be at times. And if they miss a lot of games, this team's going downhill. So the blue line's solid, like you said. Aiden Hill's solid, like you said. Hopefully he can stay healthy and not miss any games to injury as well. But when you get past that first line, we're talking about Alexander Holtz, who still hasn't made a name for himself. Pavel Dorviev on the left wing. Thomas Hertl, hopefully he can stay healthy as well. But you get down to the bottom six group. This is just not the same Vegas Golden Knights team that was a powerhouse coming into the National Hockey League. They lose Jonathan Marchessault. They lose a lot of guys on the blue line. They lose Laurent Brossoit. They've lost a lot of guys. William Karlsson's injured. They traded away Riley Smith.
They had to bring in Tanner Pearson on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, they bring in Tanner Pearson after a PTO.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Look, it's going to be interesting for the Vegas Golden Knights. I could see 5 teams from the Central Division making the playoffs and Vegas Golden Knights missing out by a couple of points just because of injuries. But we'll see what happens this upcoming season. To the third spot.
Yes, sir.
Third spot for me remains the same. I'm going with the LA Kings at number 3. This is a team that could be very, very dangerous this year. And to me, it really all depends on the play of Darcy Kemper. I think Darcy Kemper can get back to shape and form to when he won the Stanley Cup, to shape and form of when we saw him a few seasons ago with the Colorado Avalanche. First year with the Washington Capitals as well. I think he's going to be a fantastic goaltender, but a lot of it depends on him. Obviously, losing Drew Doughty for the beginning of the season hurts the blue line. You wonder about Brant Clark or Jordan Spence on the first power play unit, Vladislav Gavrikov and Joel Edmondson. Can they hold down the fort on the back end as well? But you get into the forward group. I mean, this is one of the most underrated forward groups who maybe don't get enough credit. Anze Kopitar, Adrian Kempe, your boy, Quinton Byfield. They bring in Warren Fogle, who had a breakout season last year, 40-plus points. So, my boy Trevor Moore, Philip Deneau. They bring in Tanner Jeannot for a banger league as well, who brings the boom on a nightly basis. Maybe he can get going too. This is a very sneaky forward group. I like what they bring in this offseason to get more intense and more physical on that end as well, not get pushed around like they were getting a little bit last year in the playoffs or, last year in the regular season as well. So LA Kings come in third for me in the Pacific Division.
Kevin Fiala, Adrian Kempe, 2 very underrated and solid fantasy pieces that I would be happy to have on my squad. This is another one of those situations, though, Steele, that when you look at the 2 teams above them, and it's obviously, I think it's got to be Canucks 2 and Oilers at 1, but we'll talk about that after the break. They are going to have to take their game to another level if you want to be considered good enough to take down a team like the Edmonton Oilers or Canucks in a 7-game series. And I know we're talking about regular season predictions here, but if we're playing the long game and you're the LA Kings and you're likely going to have to go through one of those 2 teams who are loaded offensively, I have a lot of pressure going on a guy in Quinton Byfield who looks like he's ready to do it. Looks like he's ready to take that secondary pressure off of Anze Kopitar and really be the guy for this team. He's young, and he hasn't done it for a full 82 games yet. Do I think he can? Is he on the cusp? Does he have breakout written all over him? Yes, and yes, but you still got to do it. And you're still leaning on a guy in Kemper that, hey, yeah, all those things you said about him holds true. He has had his struggles as well, and you got big save Dave Riddick there as the backup, who at times has been okay. I don't have a lot of confidence in David Riddick being the guy if for some reason Kemper struggles or he gets hurt. So I look at the LA Kings team as a sleeping giant, if you will, Steele. Like, you don't want to poke the bear. However, they're like at a tipping point type of spot here because Drew Doughty going down, as much as he is older, as much as his fantasy value is also risky, he is the heart and soul of that blue line. And aside from Anze Kopitar and maybe Kemper, critical to the success of this team. That's pretty obvious. However, what's not, we're bringing the fire the rest of this week, the rest of the season. Giddy up. The puck drop is here, my friends. And let's talk about these top 2 teams in the Pacific right after the break.
The NHL season is here. We'll get to the top 2 teams and everything you need to know later in the week. But first, this episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent survey. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. And once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us. And I'm going to agree with you, Flip, like you said before in that second segment. Vancouver Canucks come in second for me. Edmonton Oilers come in first. I mean, there could be some debate as well for the Vancouver Canucks to drop all the way to third with the injury to Thatcher Demko, having Arthur Shilovs and Kevin Lankinen as the tandem in the net. But we're going to leave them at second right now. Second place comes in for the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, other than that, this team is still solidified. They bring in Danton Heinen. They bring in Jake DeBrusk on that left wing side. They re-sign Niels Hoglander. I know there's Hoglander. I know there's a few injuries to Dakota Joshua and Pius Suter, but I mean, this team's very solid still. Brock Besser, I think the one thing that concerns me with him is, can he repeat a 40-goal season or repeat the season that he had last year? Hopefully he can for this top 6-4 group and for this organization. But you know, my boy JT Miller is going to get after it. I know your boy Elias Pettersson is going to get after it, and we know Quinn Hughes is going to get after it on the back end. So they're pretty much still solidified as a great team and really one of the best teams in the Pacific Division. I'm going to hold them down at number 2, but there's debate they could drop down to that third position because of the injury to Thatcher Demko.
JT Miller and Elias Pettersson up the middle is one of the best 1-2 fantasy punches at center in the entire NHL. And this comes down to Thatcher Demko. This could be a mess, Steele. And, you know, when you have the breakdowns coming out of guys like Farhan Lalji, who cover the team so closely, saying this is one of the, the muscle injury he's dealing with is not one that he's ever able to fully recover from. It's about managing the pain and playing through it. Steele, this is a guy who every single season of his NHL career has had an injury of varying degrees, but they have all been fairly serious for the most part. And there's no question about it. When he is healthy and in there, he's one of the best on the planet. And I think this is one of the guys that you and I have owned and struggled with. I think you have been especially through the ringer with Thatcher Demko because he looks like he's got a Vezina in his back pocket when he's in there making big saves, going post to post, very good lateral goalie, takes away a lot of the lower portion of the net, and that makes it tough to score goals. But without him, I have some serious concerns. And they still got to come in at second because we got to think at some point they are going to get him back. But right now, leaning on a guy in Shilovs, who I know proved he can make a big save and he looked pretty good in the postseason. If he struggles, you got to lean on Kevin Lankinen. You will not finish in second. The LA Kings, the Vegas Golden Knights, maybe even the Seattle Kraken start nipping at your heels. And just because you have a couple of real big studs in Hughes, Miller, and otherwise, doesn't mean that you win games. It might mean that you have a solid fantasy squad, but it might not mean that you're number 2 in the Pacific. But does it really matter when we know how good this Edmonton Oilers team is, Steele? I don't know if you've watched any of that Prime documentary. This team is going to be fired up and motivated. And as much as it was gut-wrenching to see, and there's always got to be a loser in sports, they bring in Skinner and Arvidsson, and I know those are only 2 guys, and I know this has been covered at length. There isn't another team in the NHL that can throw out the 3 lines that the Edmonton Oilers can. That's a defensive matchup nightmare for the opposition. Stuart Skinner, we got to feel like he's going to be calm, collected, and battle-tested now. I have a feeling this team blows the doors off of the Pacific, and I don't have the odds up for the division winner, but if it's even something respectable for the Edmonton Oilers to win, that's getting a chunk of my money. Toss that into one of your parlays upcoming and thank me later. Edmonton Oilers Cup favorites for a reason, and Pacific Division winners and favorites for a reason as well. They're nasty.
I believe they were at plus 210 when I last checked. Maybe
Jump all
below
over it.
that. Jump all over it, indeed. And I mean, look, they basically traded out Warren Fogle for Victor Arvidsson. They switched
Upgrade.
teams, and that is an upgrade for the Edmonton Oilers. And again, like I was talking about Warren Fogle and the potential that he could do for this LA Kings team. Victor Arvidsson is an upgrade for this Edmonton Oilers squad. Jeff Skinner is an upgrade on that left wing side, guy who has 30 goal potential, especially playing with Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. So there's a lot of opportunity for those two guys to make a difference. Obviously, they got to stay healthy on the Arvidsson side.
Yep.
Stuart Skinner showed us that he can be the number one guy and have that consistency. Obviously, there is still some concern with his play at times throughout the season, just like any goaltender. They go through it sometimes throughout the year. But, I mean, this is the first place Pacific team for a reason. This was a team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals and lost by one game. And they're itching to get back there. So it's going to be a very strong team. Flip over you before we wrap up.
Just the Pacific Division odds. Oilers now at down to plus 125. Canucks at actually, they got the Vegas Golden Knights next at plus 320, which I don't know how I feel of. Vancouver Canucks at plus 420, and then the Kings at plus 500.
Wow.
I know this is a bold take, but no, I'm not even going to say it.
Don't say it.
Seattle Kraken plus 1,700. That's madness. Edmonton Oilers at plus 125. The fact that you're getting plus money, slap that into a parlay. Thank me later. Let's get after it, though, the rest of the week, Steele.
We're getting after it. Thank us later this week when hockey's back on. We're breaking everything you need to know for fantasy hockey. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Make sure for your second listen, you go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. From both Flip and I, we wish you good luck with your bets tonight, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.